Good morning. Good morning. It is my pleasure to now welcome Dr. Vivian Balakrishnan, Singapore's Minister for Foreign Affairs, who is joining us now live from Singapore. We're so grateful for you to join us today to offer keynote remarks and for a question and answer session moderated by NSCAI Commissioner Gilman Louie.
Well, it's great to be here, and I want to introduce our special guest, Foreign Minister from Singapore. Vivian is a leader and a thought leader in all things digital. I think his experience, not only because of his representation on his role as Foreign Minister, but his prior role as Minister in charge of smart cities, is something we all can learn from. So let's have a round of applause to welcome the Foreign Minister, and I'll turn it over to the Foreign Minister for some opening comments before we have a short Q&A.
Thank you. Thank you, Gilman. I'm the Foreign Minister of a tiny city-state in the heart of Southeast Asia. In order to be useful, I'm going to take some liberties and make some provocative comments and invite some tough questions after this. First point, there's no doubt that artificial intelligence, the advent of computer systems that can see, hear, translate, speak, recognize patterns, play games. There's no doubt this is transformative, both at a human level and indeed at a planetary level. The second point is that this tsunami is unstoppable. It's unstoppable because of the explosive increase in computing capacity, in global connectivity, in the explosive explosion of data sets, and especially with the Internet of Things, and of course, the increasingly sophisticated mathematical models and the algorithms available. So it's not going to stop. The question is, which country or which regions are going to be at the forefront of it? What are the implications, both strategic and economic, of that contest? Second set of issues, what are the downsides of this explosion in AI? And third, what do we need to do about it at a domestic level and at international level? So let me start by saying I'm going to duck the first question of who's going to be ahead. We can indulge in crystal gazing during the question and answer session. But let me quickly go through the potential downsides of this revolution. The first thing is to understand that AI is very different from the Industrial Revolution, or indeed even the Agricultural Revolution before that. Let me give you an example. If you have a hammer in your hand, it's an extension of my muscle power. If you have an Excel spreadsheet, you basically extend the computing capacity of your mind onto a computer system, but it's still imperatively obeying your instructions. With AI, the difference now is that you have outsourced the means of pattern recognition and even of the analysis and response to the system, which means you're no longer programming the system, you're a coach to the system. And if you take the sporting analogy of a coach, the whole purpose of coaching is so that your student exceeds your capacity. There's few critical implications of this. Number one is that once you allow an autonomous system to define its own needs and optimize its own methods, actually values, ethics, morality, mission, and vision on a human scale do not necessarily exist. And it's worth remembering this, because I know there's been a lot of talk about liberty and privilege.
Hang on, Vivian. We lost some of our audio. Just hang on 1 second. Why don't we do a restart?
We see an
Yep,
erosion.
you're back on.
An erosion of trust. And you see that even now, in the very early stages, the lack of trust in authority and experts, the depletion of social capital, even in the midst of a pandemic, the fragmentation of our political and social constructs into echo chambers with no real middle ground and an exchange of views. The third implication of this AI revolution is actually on the strategic scale. You see, in a nuclear age, we sort of kept the peace through the concept of mutual to make those systems effective. Ultimately, you will take the human out of the equation, and there will be killing machines. At that point, what does the concept of human deterrence mean? So I would posit that, in fact, we're moving into a very unstable, potentially dangerous age ahead of us, at least in the short term. Now, understanding these risks, what are we going to do about it? I think number one is, let me share a story. About 6 years ago, I had a side conversation with President Obama. We were waiting for a meeting to begin. And I asked him, President, what are you most worried about when it comes to cybersecurity? He looked at me and he told me, well, in state espionage, we all do it. But we just object to commercial espionage. I've thought about that remark. And frankly, I think there are some problems if you think about that. The first point is that that's a remark that can only be made by a nation that is completely self-assured about its unprecedented lead in cyber instruments. And therefore, you can wave away and say, well, state espionage is fine. It's just commercial espionage that I'm concerned with. The second problem with that statement is that it also assumes that there is an automatic wall between the state on one hand and commercial companies on the other hand. Now, actually, if you think about it, both the state and the internet majors are all trying to erect walls. And that's why you get questions about data flows and data localization. At the same time, the truly multinational data pools lie with the internet majors, but they also are trying to construct walled gardens so that they keep the value of that data to themselves. And the missing person, the loser in all this configuration between state and internet majors, is the individual. Who owns the data? Who derives value from the data? And what are the economic implications of that? And now, somewhat belatedly, the United States, and here I will apologize in advance, but the United States is now suddenly questioning whether it needs industrial policy. The concept of industrial policy brings to mind an old Marxist concept of the commanding heights of the economy, that there are certain critical components of the economy that are of such strategic and competitive advantage that governments need to pay inordinate attention, to subsidize and to support and to expand deliberately as a matter of public policy. Now, again, we don't have time to go into that debate, but it's worth me reminding everyone that actually the outcome of this contest will depend on which governments are able to provide enough attention and subsidies to education, to infrastructure, to immigration and enlightened immigration policy, to creating a level playing field for fair competition between all commercial players whilst protecting the interests of individuals and citizens, and getting the balance right so that you socialize the gains and not just simply privatize the gains and socialize the downsides. And that really, I think, will determine the outcome of this contest. For the rest of us in Southeast Asia, we have made tremendous progress in the last 5 decades because there was, in effect, a single industrial application stack for science, for engineering, for technology, for medicine. And that gave us huge advantages. If we now go into a world where at the advent of a new technology that completely rewrites the rules, we witness a fractured world without common rules, without a common stack of norms and values and rules of engagement, then we will run into a world which will be more tense, less prosperous. The speed of progress will be interrupted by conflict rather than competition. And so, speaking from Southeast Asia, we watch all this with great interest, grave concern even, and with anxiety. So what happens in the next couple of years is going to be crucial. And on our part in Southeast Asia, we will remain open for business. We will remain open for technology diffusion. We believe that AI is another example of the global commons. The global commons, it's in a sense, for finance, we had the Bretton Woods institutions. At a strategic scale, we had the United Nations. For climate change, we have the United Nations Framework Convention for climate change. For the oceans, we've had the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea. I believe we also need a new United Nations Convention for AI to make sure we develop it, we invest in it, we give opportunities for our people, we pursue it in an ethical way, and hopefully we usher in a golden age of peace and prosperity, rather than repeat the mistakes of the last century, where we go through enormous pains and travails before we finally do the right thing. So let me stop there and take questions from you, and please be robust in your questioning.
Vivian, first of all, thank you for those really important comments. I wanted to pick up where you left off on the importance of international rules and international standards. Singapore's always been a great leader in being in the right place at the right time, first in its actual physical locations, being a leader in shipping and other forms of physical transits. And then underneath your role as a minister in charge of smart cities and digital initiatives, Singapore took the lead as being the nexus of how to deal with things like international cross-border transactions. And they required a huge amount of cooperations, and sometimes by countries who don't play well together. As you look forward in AI and the challenges that you outline, any advice you could give other nations on how to move forward in an organized way to resolve some of these challenges, to establish what are fair and ethical standards of competition and ways to resolve differences, particularly in these areas where there are social or economic differences on how you would apply AI?
Thank you, Gilman. I think the first point is that all politics is local, and all governments need to be able to explain to our own citizens that, look, there's a revolution going on, but we are going to transform the education system. We're going to restructure the economy. We're going to look at safety nets because there's going to be such profound transformation over the next few years. You first need to get domestic support for this transformation which is going to occur. So in a sense, President Biden's focus on building back better, on raising the level of confidence and hopefully consensus and congruence domestically is absolutely essential. Now, assuming you've got the political consensus and the seatbelts on for the roller coaster ride which you're going to get on, you then need to invest in the infrastructure which is needed. Everyone needs fiber to the home. There needs to be 5G for everyone. Internet access has to become almost it's just a common utility like water and electricity. Next, you need to have an education system that works, not just from kindergarten to age of 20, but all of us are going to have 2 or 3 careers in a lifetime. And you've got to make sure those subsidies flow to enable us to retool and reskill for the next set of jobs that are emerging. And then you've got to also have a system which allows you to build up both your local workforce and to be able to complement it with talent from around the world. If you look at Silicon Valley, if there was no enlightened immigration into California in the last 30 years, you would not have had the digital revolution that we have all enjoyed so far. And then, on a global scale, as I said, we do need some international conventions. We do need to be able to interoperate. We do need global finance to flow. And data is not just the new oil. Data is the new currency of the new economy. And it has to flow. But it has to flow in a way in which security is still protected, privacy is respected, and the value that is derived from it is distributed fairly. So there's a lot of pretty fundamental work that needs to be done. My point is that this should be done cooperatively, multilaterally, a new Bretton Woods in a sense, for the digital and the economy and for artificial intelligence.
As you point out, the importance of using these emerging techs to better the human condition. Singapore has kind of led the way in integrating these emerging technologies in everyday Singaporean life, from healthcare to education to digital transactions. How did Singapore was able to do all of that while still maintaining security and privacy and openness, and do so in a very reliable way? Can you share some of the lessons you learned and what Singapore has learned in that transformation to the rest of the world?
Well, first thing I'll say is Singapore is a very small place. So in a sense, it's easier for us. I mean, for instance, to lay a fiber, or in fact, 2 fibers to every single home and office in Singapore is relatively easier than if you were in a continental-sized country. But beyond the hardware, as I said, it's making sure that it is inclusive, that there is no neighborhood that is going to be deprived of internet access, that all schools will have cutting-edge technology, that all tools will be democratized and commoditized. And even as we digitize a whole suite of government services, that we make sure no one is left behind. And if you need to give people computers and pay for their broadband or give them smartphones, do so. Do so that you can move faster without leaving anyone behind. So again, I just want to emphasize that need for a domestic focus and to carry everyone along with you. And then after that, you've got to make sure you maintain trust. Without, trust is the coin of the realm. Without that, so much of all these fanciful plans that we can all dream of will not work. And once you can get that level, then finance, services, and using this as an avenue to expand opportunities for everyone, regardless what field they are in, everything becomes possible. So we are fortunate to be a small place, well integrated, well connected, top-level infrastructure, and a digitally literate population that's willing to use those tools and get ahead. And we're also lucky because we are in a unique place, both geographically and strategically. America has more invested in Southeast Asia than America has invested in China, India, Japan, and Korea combined. Most people aren't aware of that America has so much invested here. At the same time, China is our biggest trading partner, and we are significant investors in the Chinese economy as well. So for us, a world in which these competing giants hopefully get along well is one with a lot of opportunities for us and our people. But we'll have to watch this space with anxiety over the next few years, as I said. We don't control the agenda in Beijing and Washington, but we will try to be useful. We will be honest brokers. We will call a spade a spade. We will call it as it is. And in that sense, try to be helpful.
Foreign Minister, thank you for your time and for your comments. Singapore is truly a world leader in many of these areas, and we look forward to the continuing leadership you have in artificial intelligence. Thank you very much.
Thank you.